I've been sitting here for about 15 minutes, trying to figure out how to start this. My head is spinning, and my thoughts are all over the place. For context, I, 21M, have been dating my girlfriend, Sarah, 20F, for just under 2 years now, and she has a close friend, John, whom she's known since childhood. I never really liked John. He was always a little creepy. He blatantly flirted with Sarah throughout our relationship and made occasional passes that made me uncomfortable. So, cut to about 2 weeks ago, Sarah and I were invited to a party by a mutual friend, but I had a workshop for work that night, so I couldn't attend, and given the current circumstances, I wasn't inclined to go anyway. I didn't want Sarah to go either, but she was very adamant, and I guess I just didn't want an argument, so I said fine. Later that day, we ran into John, and he mentioned the same party, asking if we had been invited as well. My girlfriend told him she was going, but I wasn't, and he got this weird smile on his face and said something along the lines of, "Well, if you're going, I guess I have to go." Just something about his smile and the way he said that really rubbed me the wrong way. Plus, I didn't want to be possessive, but the idea of both of them being together all night at a party did not sit well with me. After we got back to our apartment, I told her, a bit more firmly this time, that I'm not comfortable with her going to the party, especially with him there. She told me I was overreacting and shut down the conversation at that. I'm sure most of you can figure out where this is going. I went to the workshop, and she went to the party. It got to be around 2 a.m., and she hadn't gotten home, nor was she answering my calls. Naturally, I was incredibly worried. About an hour later, one of her friends called me and told me she was found unconscious at the party and had been driven to the hospital. It was said that she was severely snuggled by John against her will, and she had and still has traces of large bruises around her neck and other parts of her body, as well as scratches and gashes. After spending 2 days, including that night, at the hospital and talking with the police, I took her home. She told me John had slipped something in her drink and dragged her upstairs where it happened in one of the bedrooms. She was an absolute mess, she didn't want to go outside, she wasn't eating, and she had terrible nightmares. I did everything I could to comfort her through this process. I was devastated for her and hated to see her like this, but, and I know this makes me sound like a terrible person, I kind of told her this would happen. I just couldn't get the fact that I tried more than once to dissuade her from going to the party, specifically expressing my discomfort with her being with John, out of my head. I feel like I could have done more to protect her, and she should have listened to how I felt. Important side note, it turns out John is literally living garbage. After what happened, we both felt it was best to seek justice. There were substances in her system and all the physical indications of a struggle. We immediately filed a restraining order, and the police opened an investigation. Within a week after the news had gotten around, 2 other girls came forward with similar encounters with John, so the guy is basically a serial struggle snuggler. Cut to now, my girlfriend is still in no better shape than she was 2 weeks ago. She gets panic attacks out of nowhere, has lost about 15 pounds, and absolutely refuses to leave our apartment, even to seek therapy. I was committed to taking care of her and being there for her, but I got a call from one of my close friends, Sam, this morning. It was a long conversation, but it basically boiled down to him, as well as many others at the party that night, saw Sarah flirting with John throughout the beginning of the party. According to him and people he had been talking to, she was, at the very least, matching if not being the initiator in these exchanges with John. He also recounts that she wasn't super intoxicated or seemingly that out of it, and worst of all, many saw her holding John's hand and taking him upstairs. At this point, I feel like I want to vomit. He told me he wanted the situation to cool down a bit before telling me and was going to inform me after the party about what happened. However, with her being taken to the hospital under the circumstances, he didn't feel it was the right time. I decided not to assume anything and asked her about the specifics of what happened that night. She tried to tell me the same thing, that she wasn't mentally there and was dragged to a bedroom, but when I told her what Sam had informed me, the color completely drained from her face. She started to panic, and I did my best to calm her down, but it was at least 30 minutes before she could catch her breath to speak. She was sobbing, but she was coherent enough to understand and basically confessed to cheating on me. She said she was tipsy and hadn't been out for so long, so she wanted some adventure. She admitted she was the one who took John to the bedroom and wasn't dragged there against her will. She kept apologizing and saying it was a terrible mistake, and that nothing else was a lie, he did do it against her will. I believe the last part. As far as I can understand now, it was when they were in the bedroom fooling around that he slipped something to her that made her feel out of it, and then he forced himself on her. I don't know what to do anymore. I left to stay at Sam's for a couple of days. She was snuggled, but to me, everything before that indicated she was still intending to cheat and actively cheating on me. I am devastated, and I don't even want to look at her right now. She lost her job due to COVID, and I pay rent for the apartment where her name isn't on the lease and groceries. She has become completely emotionally dependent on me in the past few weeks. If I were to break up with her, she would have nowhere to go, and as much as I resent her, I don't want something terrible happening to her. Please help, I don't know what to do. Update 1. Oh boy, I wish I could say things have gotten clearer in the past week, but honestly, it's been a total clusterflop, and it's only gotten worse. I spent a few days at Sam's, reaching out to friends, trying to get a clearer picture of what happened that night before going back to talk to Sarah. I got told the same story multiple times, that she was the one who started flirting with John and led him upstairs. I should say right now, in my first conversation with Sarah confronting her, she didn't explicitly say she had intended to sleep with him that night, she just confirmed she took him upstairs. She was basically having a panic attack throughout the entire conversation, so I had a hard time pushing for clarity. By this point, in my heart, I was trying to find any excuse at all for her to save our relationship, but my mind was telling me that the relationship was over, at least for the time being. Despite my obvious grief in losing a 2-year relationship, I decided I'd be willing to let her stay in my apartment rent-free, at least until the end of October to sort out other living arrangements and for support. It turns out that for about a year now, she started doing harder substances at parties when I'm not there, and her girls' nights out were often just her and some from our social circle, John included, going to a friend's apartment to take said substances. I was shocked, to say the least, and I didn't even know what to think at that moment. I just tried to ask her more about what happened on the night she was snuggled and if she was intending on cheating on me that night. She comes clean and tells me she did lead John upstairs, but swears she wasn't trying to sleep with him or anything. She just wanted substances. He told her it was one thing, but it ended up being something else. She told me he immediately started coming on to her, and she tried to fight him off, but she felt too weak to fight back. After consoling her for a while, I asked her about her relationship with John and what it was really like before, and if they did anything together prior to what happened that night. She admitted that they made out a few times before, around Christmas last year, but she promised it didn't go any further than that. She was begging me to forgive her, saying that she needs me in her life, and that she was just in a rebellious phase because of her upbringing. I didn't know what to believe anymore and still don't, to be honest. I was completely overwhelmed by everything, so I told her I needed to clear my head and left again. I talked to some of my friends she said she was doing substances with, and they confirmed everything. I was pretty upset with them for hiding it from me, but they told me she basically forced them to keep it a secret from me. It feels like so much of my relationship was a lie. She wasn't the person I thought she was, and she lied constantly for who knows how long. At this point, my mind is basically made up, so I call her and tell her it's over, but she can stay at my apartment until the end of October only if she finds a therapist and gets help during that time. She basically loses it during the call, but my mind is made up, so I just say I'll be staying at Sam's for a while and hang up. I wish that was the last of what happened, but literally a day after that, I start getting spammed with hate messages and calls from friends, relatives, and people I don't even know. Turns out she's posted all over social media about how I was breaking up with her because she was snuggled, and kicking her out with nowhere to go in these COVID times. She also wrote that I've been emotionally abusing her after what happened, victim blaming her, and stopping her from getting a therapist. I'm completely lost, furious, heartbroken, I can't even describe all the emotions I felt. I called her again that night and told her she has 2 weeks to move out now, and I don't want to hear from her again. I had to spend the past week playing damage control, trying to clear my name on social media, and calling friends and family. I was ostracized by coworkers, though luckily my boss was on my side. I was getting constant unalive threats, and my life basically fell apart. Sam, thankfully, was completely understanding throughout all of this, and said I could stay at his place until Sarah moved out. She's moving out on Friday, but I don't want to go back to that apartment anymore. I've had to cut out several friends, and my reputation is now in the garbage. I lost the first and only person I've ever loved. I don't know anymore. I low-key want to run alive, but I'll find a therapist sooner or later. I just feel numb to everything. I don't even know if I'm right or wrong in this situation anymore.